Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I am Fiza Jamal bringing you our main stories in detail. Iran rejects UK's tanker attack claims. Iran has rejected claims it tried to block a British oil tanker near the Strait of Hormuz. In a statement, Iran's Revolutionary Guards said they didn't conduct any such operation. Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif called Britain's accusations worthless. The UK government has claimed 5 Iranian vessels tried to block the passage of the British heritage. It said they backed off after receiving a warning from a Royal Navy warship. President Hassan Rouhani has threatened Britain with consequences for seizing an Iranian oil tanker off Gibraltar last week. And Iran hits out at curbs. Iran says it faces economic terrorism from the United States with its sadistic sanctions. At the International Atomic Energy Agency meeting, Tehran's envoy called for an end to illegal unilateral U.S. sanctions. This comes after U.S. President Trump accused Tehran of secretly enriching uranium. Details in this report.
President Trump says Iran's enrichment of uranium violates the nuclear deal. Responding to the accusation, Iran's envoy to the UN watchdog, Kazim Gharib-Abadi, says Tehran has nothing to hide. He says enrichment is not prohibited under the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
They are producing plutonium, thousands of plutonium. You know that the issue of enrichment is not prohibited under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is the right of every member to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and this is Iran's right also. And what we are doing is, in a very transparent manner, is under the surveillance of the IAEA.
Meanwhile, Europe's nuclear deal signatories have called an urgent meeting to discuss Tehran's compliance.
Top Russian and U.S. diplomats have failed to find common ground in a meeting on Venezuela. Meeting in Helsinki, U.S. envoy David Hale also discussed ways to improve bilateral ties with Russia's deputy foreign minister. Sergei Ryabkov said they discussed the political crisis in Venezuela but failed to narrow their differences. Russia supports Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, while the U.S. is leading efforts to force him out of the office. The U.S. State Department said Hale sought to foster cooperation with Moscow on political challenges in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. This meeting was scheduled after U.S. President Donald Trump and Russia's President Vladimir Putin held talks on the sidelines of the G20 summit last month. The UK has refused to grant visa to a Russian diplomat invited to take part in a media freedom conference in London. The Russian embassy has called the decision a violation of international law. The Global Conference on Media Rights is a combined initiative of the UK and Canada to improve the safety of journalists across the world. Germany's Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen has asked MEPs to support her nomination as the next head of the European Union executive. In meetings with centrist and left-leaning blocs, she promised to fight climate change and pressed for gender balance within the bloc. The meetings in Brussels were aimed at building the majority von der Leyen needs to take office. In her public comments, she expressed hope Britain would abandon its plans to leave the EU. She also promised to defend the Irish backstop provision in its withdrawal agreement with the EU. Von der Leyen said she wholeheartedly supports the goal of a carbon-neutral European Union by 2050. In Afghanistan, President Ashraf Ghani has called on the Taliban to negotiate with his government. Speaking at a conference in Kabul, Ghani said in the past the time was not right for peace, but now is the right moment. He said if this opportunity is lost, the responsibility will be huge. The statement comes after a two-day meeting between the Taliban and officials held in Doha. Women's rights, power sharing with the Taliban, and the role of regional powers were discussed in the intra-Afghan summit. Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has appointed a new investigation team to look into the use of banned munitions in Syria. The team from a global chemical weapons watchdog will investigate 9 alleged attacks carried out during Syria's 8-year civil war. The organization was created in 1997 as a technical body to enforce a global non-proliferation treaty. The US and EU support the new mandate of the British-led 10-member investigation team. The Syrian government and its allies, Russia and Iran, oppose investigation teams' greater powers. Masroor Barzani has been sworn in as the new Prime Minister of the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq. In a session of the autonomous Kurdish parliament, 88 MPs out of 101 backed Barzani. The new Prime Minister says his top priority is to build stronger ties with Baghdad. He says he has no plans to seek independence. Barzani is the son of Masoud Barzani, a former Prime Minister of the autonomous Kurdish region. The European Union is considering plans to impose sanctions on Turkey for refusing to halt gas drilling operations off the coast of divided Cyprus. According to a draft statement by bloc's foreign ministers, the EU may suspend high-level talks and freeze funding for Turkey next year. More restrictive measures may be added if Turkey continues the drilling. The draft will be discussed today by EU envoys in Brussels, where it may be adopted. Turkey has rejected Greek and EU allegations that its drilling off Cyprus is illegitimate. 6 foreign nationals, including 2 children, have been killed in hailstorms that pounded much of Greece. More than 100 others were injured by the severe weather. Strong winds, rain, and hail uprooted trees, brought down houses, and sent roofs flying. Greek police say 2 elderly Czech tourists were killed when winds swept away their trailer. A Romanian woman and an 8-year-old boy were killed at a restaurant after its roof collapsed. 2 others were crushed by an uprooted tree. Authorities have declared an emergency in northern and central Greece and deployed an extra 140 firefighters. In Pakistan, 13 passengers have been killed and 64 others injured in a train accident in Rahim Yar Khan district of Punjab province. The Akbar Express was derailed after a collision with a stationary freight train at Sadiqabad station on its way from Lahore to Quetta. Police officials say the passenger train driver took a wrong turn, causing the head-on crash. They say 9 women and 11 children are among the injured. Railway traffic has been suspended in southern Pakistan to allow the lines to be cleared. Officials warn the death toll may rise. The French government says its missiles found from a rebel base in Libya were unusable. The defense ministry says US-made Javelin missiles discovered in the camp south of Tripoli were purchased by France, but it denies supplying them to Libyan rebel commander Khalifa Haftar in a breach of UN arms embargo. The anti-tank missiles were seized when forces loyal to Libya's government overran the rebel base in Karyan. And Somalia has executed 3 members of the insurgent group Al-Shabaab who were convicted of bombing a Mogadishu hotel in 2017. 18 people were killed and 47 others injured in the incident. Al-Shabaab has been trying to topple Somalia's government since 2011. Now it's time for us to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back after the break. Now we'll continue with our main stories. The new U.S. envoy for East Asia, David Stilwell, has arrived in Tokyo for a 4-day trip to the region. Stilwell will meet Japanese diplomats and defense officials during his 4-day visit. He's scheduled to discuss the Middle East crisis with Tokyo's senior policymakers. Stilwell has taken up the role after it was left vacant for more than 2 years, despite major challenges in the Asia-Pacific. In London, British Prime Ministerial candidate Jeremy Hunt says states must pay a diplomatic price for abusing the media. Speaking at the Global Media Freedom Conference, Hunt asked liberal democracies to practice what they preach. The event is being attended by delegations from over 100 countries, but not Russia. The British and Canadian hosts pledged to protect press freedom and cooperate with other states to respond to specific violations. Human rights lawyer Amal Clooney criticized U.S. President Donald Trump for vilifying media personnel. British Foreign Secretary Hunt urged participants not to give up on the cause of press freedom.
It would be easy to succumb to fatalism, but we must resist that, because if we act together, we can shine a spotlight on abuses and impose a diplomatic price on those who'd harm journalists or lock them up for doing their jobs.
This conference will propose measures to improve press freedom, journalists' safety, and counter disinformation. Moving on, Olarinde Ayan Fioluwa, a Nigerian artist, has discovered an unfamiliar way to transform scribbles into portraits, cartoons, and fantasy characters. More in this report.
The Nigerian artist has found an unusual way of expressing herself. Creating art out of doodles, Ayan Fioluwa highlights challenges facing countrymen. Ayan Fioluwa has worked on more than 100 scribbles pieces in the last 2 years.
I was really frustrated because there was so much pressure on me, so I just picked up a pen. That was the only thing I could find around me. Being that I was a pencil artist, I had to use pen to draw, so I was frustrated, and then I just started doing jaga jaga, and in my jaga jaga I saw a face. I'm like, oh wow, then I moved on from there. So afterwards I started building on scribble art, I started mastering it, and then I figured that it was a better way for me to express myself.
The artist takes part in exhibitions and also creates awareness about this art form. Ayan Fioluwa's latest collection is about the regular power cuts in Nigeria.
So I decided to tell one of the lies the government told us. All these are politicians, they come in, they say that they're going to give us light, stable electricity and all of that. So this is an artwork that actually shows a normal, like an average youth screaming up NEPA.
She hopes to create awareness about the social evils among the public through her artwork.
Let's take you to the world of business, where U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered an investigation into France's plan to tax foreign tech giants. The new tax will target firms such as Google and Facebook with a 3% levy on revenue generated in France. In a statement, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer expressed concern about the planned digital tax. He says Washington's inquiry will determine whether the levy will hurt U.S. tech companies. France says the tax will target 30 firms, most of them American. British, Chinese, German and Spanish corporations will also be affected. The French Parliament is expected to approve the new tax today. Asian stock markets have risen over optimism that U.S. interest rates could be cut later this month. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and South Korea's Kospi indices have risen significantly. Mainland Chinese shares, Japan's Nikkei 225 and Australia's ASX 200 also gained. European stocks are rising fractionally in early trading. Germany's DAX is in positive territory despite Deutsche Bank losing more than 1.5%. Oil futures are up about 0.5% higher. The dollar has hit a 5-day low after reaching a 3-week high on Wednesday. Let's have a quick look at what the weather is looking like today around the globe. These are all the main stories in detail we have for you this hour. You can also choose to keep tabs on all of our social media. Find us by the name Indus.News.